mentioned, the EBRD was set up, you may not remember, in the early 90s to help
the establishment of the right environment for investment into areas like adaptation, as Martin mentioned, whether it's in renewable energy, etc. But also in relation to dealing with consequences of climate change, such as climate-induced displacement, which I'll touch on later on, both internally and also within the region, and in the way in which we deal with this specifically. Just by way of background, small island states are at the forefront of climate change. In the Pacific, natural disasters and slow onset events are already impacting the ability of our people to realize and enjoy their human rights. We have a constitution, for example, that has a vast array of not just only civil and political rights, but also socio-economic rights. And that, of course, is an enormous impact on the state to actually deliver on those rights too. Some Fijian communities in the recent past have been relocated or in the process of being relocated to higher ground because of inundation of rising seas. Forced relocations can also have a disassociating effect on the communities and the communities in which they lived in themselves. Natural disasters, of course, will become a lot more intense, more frequent, more erratic, as you saw last year when we had Cyclone Winston that killed 44 Fijians. 40,000 Fijians were displaced or lost their homes. About 225 schools were damaged, and we lost about a third of the value of our GDP. We have seen, this also affects also the region itself. We have countries like Tuvalu and Kiribati, where Fiji has actually come out specifically and offered them what generally people call climate refugee status. Tuvalu is only 12 feet above sea level. There are numerous issues that actually emanate from that. So, for example, if you have an archipelago, you measure your EEZ from the last island, the 200-mile economic zone. Now, if your last island submerges beneath water, where do you measure your 200-mile economic zone from? Do you measure it from the island that used to be above water? Or do you measure your economic zone from the island that still remains above water? So these are very pertinent issues, and these sorts of issues have not actually been very well elucidated. We set a very sort of modest budget last year to 50,000 Fijian dollars, which is about 25,000 US, within the Attorney General's office to actually start looking at these areas and hopefully develop some partnerships. And I was very interested in some of the comments that were made as to how we can discuss these issues. One of the countries that I have just mentioned has already bought about 5,000 acres of freehold land in Fiji. And now they have not used that as yet, but obviously they may look to utilizing their land for maybe food security. Now, if they, for example, the island is submerged and people need to be relocated, when they do come to Fiji, what sort of status will they have in Fiji? We've already made a sort of a moral and ethical pledge to say we keep them, but what will be their legal status? Do they automatically become Fijian citizens? Even indeed, our laws themselves, the current immigration laws, do not have any such provision. So there's a number of issues that actually crop up because of these matters. What we've seen also that, as I mentioned, that within Fiji itself, for example, we have about 91% of all the land in Fiji is Italkia land, or what we call indigenous owned land. These lands are communally owned lands. Now, so if you have, for example, a village, we've already relocated 3 villages to higher ground. If they are now being relocated, suddenly the pool of land that they do own on a communal basis is reduced. Sometimes there may be issues where they may need to be actually relocated to land which they may not necessarily own themselves. It's owned by another landowning unit of what we call a matagali. So again, these are sorts of issues that have emanated and which we need to deal with, and frankly, they have not been dealt with in a very concrete manner. It's very, very fluid at the moment. And so what are some of the issues that we do need to raise in respect of that? I'd also like to say that Martin has also mentioned is very important, and that is in relation to adaptation methods. We know that for small island states and many other parts of the world, the focus really is on adaptation as opposed to mitigation. Nonetheless, because of the NDC, the commitments we've made, to reduce, for example, in Fiji's case, our emissions reducing by 30% by 2030, we need to focus a lot more on renewable energy. We need to get greater source of renewable energy. We may need to put in place laws, and we currently don't have laws where people can actually sell back to the grid if they generate electricity themselves. So again, the lack of expertise does exist in those areas. There may be other countries that have developed those laws. So it's hopefully through these sorts of gatherings that you'll be able to network and get that leverage, if you like. Because frankly, I think, it's from a practical sense, of course, we have the Paris Agreement, but from a practical sense, we do need to be able to collaborate a lot more in many of these areas where, frankly, there's a dearth of law in these areas, particularly in the smaller states. You have island countries in the Pacific where the entire population of the country is 15,000 people. So you can imagine that the pool of people will be very much limited for you to choose from to be able to help you develop a legal framework to be able to deal with such matters. I'd like to also just very quickly talk about we ourselves, we've developed a national climate change policy which had guided the development of Fiji's green growth framework. And in fact, next week, the Honorable Prime Minister of Fiji will be also launching our National Development Plan here in Bonn, a 5-year and a 20-year development plan, which was also climate sensitized by organizations such as WRI. Now, what we want to do, of course, with this is to be able to reach out to our development partners, to be able to reach out to various other parties, to be able to say, this is the direction we are going in. However, these plans do not necessarily have any relocation guidelines to actually guide the relocation that we need to have. We have identified another 43 villages that need to be moved to higher ground. So we have started with the development of this. We're in the process of completing the draft. Of course, we look forward to various inputs from that to ensure a protection-sensitive and sustained approach to relocation. The guidelines have developed through a thorough consultation process that included a range of government agencies and other development partners. As you know, relocation also, we need to be very sensitive about gender issues too. Because sometimes when you do have relocation, the women's voices are missed out. And again, because if you are moving villages to higher ground, you need to also look at alternative livelihoods. These are some of the issues that do come to the fore. Fiji was one of the first states to devise a national framework for the protection and support of its people threatened by climate change relocation. In 2016, it was decided the initial guideline on relocation to focus on indigenous communities first and emphasize a people-centered approach where the community must approach the government to request relocation. This approach can make something as stressful as relocating due to climate change a transformative experience, as everyone in the community needs to agree to the move. And again, the input of women and various other stakeholders need to be put very much in place. The UNHCR Brookings and Georgetown Guidance Toolkit on the planned relocation is important to the development of national guidelines, as it provides overarching principles for states and other actors to plan and implement planned relocations at a rate we have not experienced before. In addition, the toolkit provides concrete suggestions through case studies of relocating people in order to protect them from disasters and environmental change. These are invaluable inputs for states and other actors who are navigating a new domain of human movement. The case studies in the toolkit highlight the challenges faced by communities and how such challenges may be avoided or addressed. We are delighted to see that the toolkit actually highlights examples from Fiji. One example highlighted is the relocation of a village called Buni Nongaloa in Fiji, which I mentioned. One of the challenges during this relocation was coming to terms, I quote, with a dramatic decision to exhume the remains of the ancestors and move them to a new burial location. The elders did not want to leave the cemetery where it was, to be washed away, so the church arranged for the burial site to be moved. So these are many practical issues that actually do emanate from these types of issues. So ladies and gentlemen, I do not necessarily want to make a very long speech, but essentially to highlight that when we talk about the legal framework at a very domestic and regional level for us, there is the opportunity to be able to work with various partners, because many of the challenges are very basic from one perspective, what you may take for granted in other countries, such as, for example, in order to be able to attract independent power producers to come into the market, to be able to provide renewable energy technology and have that uptake of technology within our country, we actually don't have the legal framework to do so. And we need to actually escalate that very quickly. Similarly, we're looking at, for example, at the moment, things like green transportation, looking at even things like e-ticketing is very much part and parcel of that. To be able to then measure the level of traffic in buses to be able to know what type of buses you require is very much interlinked. And all of that requires a sort of legal input. Similarly, as we've said, that in the Pacific, we have the issue of relocation of persons, cross-border and also within the countries themselves. And I hope that the forum today will be able to discuss some of these issues, and we look forward to working with many of you. And as I've said, we'll, through the sponsors of this event, also like to invite those of you who are interested to come to Fiji and help us develop this hub in terms of some of the legal issues that are emanating from the Pacific, which I'm sure are equally applicable to other parts of the world, including the Indian Ocean and the Caribbean. Thank you very much, and I should be moving on.
Fruitful discussions and valuable findings.
Of people to higher ground. So thank you. Very, very greatly appreciated. Spirit facing them and looking for solutions and faced with courage. And yet they're exactly the war stories. Very practical of the Paris Agreement. So we're going to have a panel on that I'm presidency of the COP. I'm from goals. So for us, it's very important that during the roundtable and the sessions, we hear. But nevertheless, we must now focus.
And in Asia for many years of her in Wales. Very warm welcome to you, Mary.
With the private sector, that's mainly what we do, on fostering projects